What invisible astronomical force is so powerful that it can transform a scorching, lifeless desert the size of the United States into a lush, vibrant paradise teeming with deep freshwater lakes and massive megafauna, only to violently snatch it all away again in the blink of a geological eye? And more importantly, what terrifying, silent mechanism ticking away right now in the dark vacuum of space guarantees that this massive green ocean will inevitably return? We will uncover the answer to this staggering planetary mystery at the very end of our journey tonight. So, pull your blankets close, let your mind wander into the deep corridors of time, and make sure to watch until the very end to discover the secret, celestial clockwork that dictates the life and death of the largest hot desert on Earth. Welcome to Sleep Time Narratives. Here, we leave behind the frantic noise, the blinding artificial lights, and the exhausting, relentless pace of the modern waking world. We journey together into the quiet, forgotten, and beautifully dark corners of natural history and the cosmos, exploring environments that demand absolutely nothing from us but our peaceful observation. Tonight, we are stepping back thousands of years to witness one of the most profound and beautiful ecological transformations in the history of our planet. Settle in, let the tension drain completely from your muscles, unclench your jaw, and prepare to watch the sands of time run backward, turning a world of fire and dust into an endless, soothing oasis of green. To truly appreciate the magnitude of this ancient transformation, we must first look at the Sahara as it exists in our modern waking world. Today, it is an ocean of fire. Covering over 3.5 million square miles of northern Africa, it is a landscape defined by absolute, punishing extremes. It is a realm of towering, shifting sand dunes that ripple like petrified waves, vast plains of cracked, sun-baked stone, and dry, echoing canyons that have not felt the touch of rain in decades. The air here is so completely stripped of moisture that it actively pulls hydration from anything that dares to cross its path. It is a beautiful, terrible, and utterly silent wasteland, but this barrenness is a magnificent illusion. The Sahara is not a dead zone, it is merely sleeping. It is locked in a temporary phase of a massive, ancient, and entirely predictable cycle. To find the architect of the green world that once thrived here, we cannot look at the sand, and we cannot look at the sky from the surface of the earth. We must leave the blistering heat of the desert entirely. We start in space, watching the earth in extreme slow motion. Suspended in the freezing, absolute void of the cosmos, our blue marble appears perfectly still, a fragile jewel isolated in the infinite dark. From this impossible vantage point, the daily struggles of humanity, the borders of nations, and the noise of our civilization vanish completely. There is only the grand, silent mechanics of the solar system. As we drift above the planet, the auditory environment undergoes a profound shift. The harsh, howling winds of the terrestrial desert are entirely replaced by the sounds of the void. You are enveloped by a deep, resonant, cosmic drone mixed with the incredibly heavy, comforting sound of an approaching, continent-spanning monsoon. This sound is not the noise of weather. It is the acoustic representation of planetary physics, a low-frequency hum that vibrates through the very fabric of space-time, slowing your heart rate and aligning your breathing with the ancient rhythm of the spheres. To understand how a desert blooms, we must observe the intricate dance between the Earth and the Sun. Our planet does not orbit our star in a perfect, unchanging circle, nor does it spin perfectly upright like a rigid top. The Earth is caught in a complex web of gravitational forces, constantly pulled and nudged by the immense mass of Jupiter and Saturn. Over tens of thousands of years, these gravitational tugs cause the Earth's orbit to stretch and compress, and they cause the planet itself to wobble on its axis. This wobble is the silent metronome of the global climate. We are currently observing a subtle, majestic tilt of the planet's axis alters the angle of the sun, pulling the massive tropical rain belt northward over the barren African continent. Imagine a child's spinning top as it begins to lose momentum. Before it falls, the top of the toy begins to trace a slow, wide circle in the air, leaning precariously from side to side. The Earth does exactly this, executing a slow, continuous wobble known as axial precession. As this celestial wobble occurs over a cycle of roughly 26,000 years, the exact angle at which the northern hemisphere faces the sun during its summer months slowly, agonizingly shifts. Right now, as we watch from the dark of space, the planet is tilting into its optimal position. The northern hemisphere is leaning just a fraction of a degree further toward the intense heat of the sun during the summer solstice. It is a microscopic change in the grand scale of the universe, but for the surface of the Earth, it is a catalyst of unimaginable power. As the axis shifts, the distribution of solar energy changes drastically. The massive, sprawling landmass of North Africa, directly exposed to this intensified solar radiation, begins to heat up exponentially. The rock and sand of the Sahara absorb the energy, turning the continent into a colossal thermal engine. As the land superheats, the air resting above it rapidly expands and rises high into the stratosphere. This massive, vertical column of rising air creates a profound atmospheric void at the surface, a low-pressure system of staggering proportions. But nature, in its infinite pursuit of balance, abhors a vacuum. To fill this immense, continent-sized void, the atmosphere acts like a massive planetary lung, taking a deep, desperate breath. It reaches out across the equator, dragging in cooler, incredibly dense, and moisture-laden air from the vast expanse of the Atlantic Ocean and the Gulf of Guinea. This invisible, atmospheric tidal wave is the physical mechanism pulling the massive tropical rain belt northward over the barren African continent. This is not the chaotic, unpredictable weather of our modern news cycles. This is the African humid period, a climate epoch that lasted for thousands of years, entirely rewriting the geography of a continent. Let us descend from the quiet of space and follow this massive river of atmospheric moisture as it rushes toward the land. We are sinking back down through the layers of the atmosphere, leaving the freezing void and entering the thick, heavy embrace of the storm. As we approach the Earth's surface, the deep, resonant, cosmic drone mixed with the incredibly heavy, comforting sound of an approaching, continent-spanning monsoon becomes a physical sensation. You can feel the barometric pressure dropping, a heavy, warm weight settling over your skin. It is the feeling of immense, impending relief, the profound exhalation of a world that has been holding its breath for 10,000 years. The sky over the Sahara, usually a pale, blinding blue, transforms entirely. It bruises, it swells with trillions of tons of evaporated ocean water, turning a deep, necrotic violet, thick with churning clouds that stretch from the Atlantic coast all the way to the Red Sea. The harsh, unyielding sun is completely blocked out, replaced by a heavy, protective twilight that blankets the hot sand. And then, the heavens finally open. The first drops of rain to hit the deep desert do not fall gently. They are massive, heavy spheres of water, striking the baked earth with dull, resonant thuds. Within moments, the sparse drops merge into a relentless, deafening roar. The dry wadis and ancient, empty riverbeds begin to flash with violent, rushing currents of dark brown, sediment-choked water. The parched earth drinks until it can hold no more, and still, the rain continues to fall. This is not a storm that passes in an afternoon. This is the new normal. The celestial wobble has locked the monsoon engine into place. It will rain for months at a time, year after year, century after century. Allow the heavy, continuous sound of this ancient rain to wash over your consciousness. The tension of the dry, blistering heat is gone. The anxiety of the modern world is completely drowned out by the sheer, overwhelming volume of the falling water. You are insulated. You are safe. The barren world is being fundamentally healed, transformed, and reborn before your very eyes. The celestial mechanics have done their work. The angle has shifted, the sun has spoken, and the ocean of sand is rapidly dissolving into an endless sea of life. Rest here, in the heavy, warm dark of the monsoon, and let the rhythmic, unbroken drumming of the rain carry you deeper into the quiet, forgotten past. We have left the freezing, absolute void of the cosmos behind us. We are no longer observing the grand, silent mechanics of the solar system from afar. Instead, we are surrendering to the pull of gravity, following the massive, invisible river of atmospheric moisture as it rushes toward the superheated continent. As we descend through the layers of the atmosphere, the dark, starry expanse above is swallowed by a bruised, heavy canopy of clouds. We are sinking into the very heart of the African humid period. To understand the sheer, unimaginable scale of the transformation that has taken place on the surface of the earth, we must glide low over the landscape. In the modern waking world, a flight over the central Sahara reveals nothing but an endless, punishing ocean of golden dunes, jagged rock formations, and blinding, heat-distorted horizons. It is a place of fire and dust. But as we break through the low-hanging, heavy cloud cover of this ancient timeline, the visual that greets us defies everything we know about the geography of North Africa. There is no sand. There is no dust. There is only water. We are gliding low over an inland freshwater ocean larger than the Caspian Sea. This is Lake Mega Chad, a colossal inland sea that has swollen to cover over 130,000 square miles of the African continent. It is a body of water so unimaginably vast that if you were standing on its muddy shores, the curvature of the earth would hide the opposite bank, tricking your mind into believing you were looking out at the open ocean. Yet, there is no salt here. This is an empire of pure, life-giving fresh water, a massive reservoir born from the relentless, century-spanning monsoons that the celestial wobble has dragged across the equator. The water is a deep, tranquil blue, mirroring a sky filled with heavy, rolling rain clouds. Because of the sheer depth and volume of this megalake, the surface does not churn with the chaotic, violent energy of the open sea. It is incredibly heavy, calm, and majestic. The deep, dark, indigo hues of the water suggest a profound, lightless depth where the ancient bedrock of the continent has simply surrendered to the weight of the rain. The surface acts as a colossal, dark mirror, perfectly reflecting the bruised purples and deep grays of the monsoon storm systems that slowly, continuously march across the heavens. As we drift effortlessly just a few feet above the surface of this impossible lake, the auditory landscape begins to wrap around us, providing a thick, comforting acoustic blanket. The roaring, chaotic winds of the upper atmosphere have been left behind. Here, at the boundary where the heavy air meets the water, the sounds are delicate, rhythmic, and incredibly soothing. Listen closely to the rhythmic, gentle lapping of small waves against a muddy bank. This is the heartbeat of Lake Mega Chad. Because the mega lake is entirely landlocked, its tides are not governed by the violent gravitational pull of the moon in the same way the oceans are. Instead, the movement of the water is dictated by the steady, warm breezes of the humid epoch. Millions of tiny, perfectly formed ripples travel across the vast expanse of the deep blue water, eventually rolling into the shallows and breaking softly against the earth. Hush, hush, hush. It is a slow, wet, and highly tactile sound, a continuous liquid metronome that washes away the sharp, jagged anxieties of the modern world. Every gentle crash of water against the soft mud is a reminder that the earth is not a static, dead place, but a living, breathing entity capable of profound renewal. Let us follow the gentle motion of these waves toward the edge of the world. As we approach the boundaries of this inland ocean, the deep blue waters begin to shallow, revealing a thriving, vibrant ecosystem that seems entirely alien to the concept of the Sahara. Tall, green reeds sway gently along the infinite shoreline. These are not sparse, desperate patches of vegetation clinging to life in a dry world. This is a massive, impenetrable forest of thick papyrus and giant aquatic grasses that stretches for thousands of miles along the water's edge. The reeds grow so densely that they form a massive, living wall of vibrant emerald green, a stark and beautiful contrast to the dark, heavy water and the gray, rolling sky. As the warm, humid breeze sweeps across the lake, it catches the tops of these towering grasses, causing them to bend and sway in perfect, synchronized harmony. The visual is deeply hypnotic, a slow-motion, undulating wave of green that travels endlessly down the shoreline. Beneath the surface of this tranquil blue water, an entire universe of life is thriving in the dark. The megalake is not an empty basin. It is a rich, hyper-productive biological engine. Massive Nile perch, fish that can grow to the size of a grown human, glide silently through the deep, cool currents. Colossal crocodiles, the ancient, armored masters of the waterways, rest motionless in the muddy shallows, completely hidden within the thick stalks of the green reeds. They do not need to fight for survival here. The lake provides an absolute, unyielding abundance. But we will not disturb the ancient predators resting in the mud. We remain safely suspended above the water, insulated from the physical struggles of the food chain, existing purely as quiet observers of this magnificent, vanished world. The air here is incredibly thick. It is supersaturated with moisture, a heavy, humid atmosphere that feels almost like a warm, comforting blanket draped over your shoulders. With every breath you take in this ancient world, you draw in the clean, purifying scent of fresh rain, damp earth, and crushed green leaves. It is an aroma of pure vitality, a scent that signals absolute safety and biological comfort to the deepest, oldest parts of the human brain. Your nervous system recognizes this environment. It knows that where there is this much water and this much life, there is no immediate danger of starvation or drought. It is a signal to the body that it is finally safe to power down, to rest, and to heal. As we drift further along the infinite shoreline, looking out over the water that stretches beyond the horizon, the sky begins to speak. It is not a violent, sudden crack that startles the heart. It is the distant, soothing rumble of thunder rolling across the water. Because the surface of Lake Megachad is so incredibly flat and vast, sound travels across it with beautiful, unimpeded clarity. A storm cell, perhaps 50 or 100 miles away, releases a massive discharge of atmospheric electricity. By the time the sound wave travels across the cool surface of the lake and reaches our ears, the sharp, aggressive edges of the thunderclap have been completely worn away. What arrives is a deep, resonant, sub-bass vibration. It is a slow, heavy, rolling groan that originates from the very edge of the world, vibrating softly through the humid air and resonating deeply within the chest. This distant thunder is the ultimate lullaby of the ancient earth. It is a constant, rumbling reminder of the immense, unstoppable forces of nature that are actively maintaining this lush paradise. The storms will not cease. The rains will not fail. The mega lake will remain full and tranquil for thousands of years. The sheer, overwhelming permanence of this massive body of water provides a profound psychological anchor. You do not need to worry about the lake drying up tomorrow. You do not need to worry about the scorching sun returning. The celestial mechanics have locked this humid, peaceful epoch into place, and you are invited to simply rest within it. Imagine allowing yourself to sink softly into the tall, green reeds along the muddy bank. The ground beneath you is soft, cool, and perfectly contoured to your weight. The thick stalks of the papyrus rise high above your head, forming a protective emerald canopy that completely hides you from the rest of the world. You are invisible. You are untethered from the demands of time and modern society. From your hidden sanctuary within the reeds, you can look out through the green stalks at the deep, tranquil blue water. You watch the hypnotic, rhythmic lapping of the small waves against the mud, a continuous cycle of motion and sound that slowly, methodically lulls the waking mind into a state of heavy, dreamless trance. The heavy, rolling rain clouds above continue their slow, majestic march across the sky, painting the water in shifting shades of indigo and slate. The distant, soothing rumble of thunder echoes across the vast, empty expanse, a low-frequency vibration that hums in perfect synchronization with your own slowing heartbeat. There is nothing to achieve here. There are no tasks to complete, no screens to look at, and no anxieties to process. The Sahara is green, the mega lakes are full, and the world is at peace. Surrender to the heavy, humid air. Let the rhythmic lapping of the water wash over your consciousness, carrying away the last remaining fragments of your day. Allow the distant thunder to rock you gently, guiding you down into the deep, quiet, and profoundly restful depths of the ancient African humid period. We have left the soft, muddy banks of the great inland ocean behind us, drifting slowly away from the gentle, rhythmic lapping of the waves. As we move inland, the heavy, dark indigo clouds of the massive monsoon systems begin to break apart, just enough to let the dying light of the afternoon pour through. We are entering the sprawling, infinite interior of the African continent during the height of the humid period, and the environment is preparing to reveal a completely different, yet equally mesmerizing, kind of ocean. In the modern waking world, the interior of the Sahara is a blinding, white-hot expanse of shifting dunes and jagged, sun-baked rock, where the heat radiates from the earth with such violent intensity that it distorts the very air, creating shimmering mirages of water that do not exist. But as you look out over this ancient landscape, the harsh, unforgiving glare is entirely gone. Instead, the world is bathed in the rich, thick, honey-colored light of a perpetual golden hour. This light is incredibly soft, filtered through the heavy, moisture-laden atmosphere. It casts long, cooling velvet shadows across a landscape that is almost impossible to comprehend. Before you lies an endless, sprawling savanna, a vast, unbroken sea of towering, vibrant green grass that stretches continuously all the way to the distant, hazy horizon. This is the true heart of the Green Sahara. The immense volume of rain that has fallen upon this continent has not just created lakes, it has saturated the earth, transforming millions of square miles of what would eventually become sterile sand into one of the most productive, abundant, and nutrient-rich grazing lands in the history of the planet. As the warm, humid evening breeze sweeps across this endless plain, the grass responds. It moves not as individual, rigid blades, but as a massive, fluid entity. It ripples and rolls in slow, majestic waves, catching the golden sunlight and shimmering with a deep, vital energy. The auditory landscape of this rolling sea of grass is your first layer of deep, biological white noise. Listen to the slow, continuous, sweeping rustle of millions of leaves brushing against one another. It is a soft, papery hiss, a gentle, sweeping sound that rises and falls in perfect synchronization with the breath of the wind. It completely fills the acoustic space, acting as a warm, comforting foundation that insulates your mind from the silence of the void. But this sea of grass is not empty. Because the earth here provides an absolute, unyielding abundance of food and water, it supports life on a scale of staggering, gargantuan proportions. We are drifting above the domain of the prehistoric megafauna, the ancient titans of the savanna. Through the golden haze, the massive silhouettes of these gentle giants begin to emerge. In the distance, moving with an agonizing, beautiful slowness, is a herd of ancient giraffes. They weave through a sparse, scattered grove of lush green acacia trees, their long, elegant necks reaching effortlessly into the high canopy. Because they face no desperate struggle for resources, there is absolutely no frantic energy in their movements. They step with a deliberate, calculated grace, their heavy hooves parting the tall grass with a soft, muffled swish. Watch as they reach for the leaves. The motion is so slow, so perfectly unhurried, that it almost looks as though they are moving underwater. The golden sunlight catches the intricate, mosaic patterns of their coats, blending them perfectly into the dappled shadows of the trees. They exist in a state of absolute, peaceful grazing, completely untroubled by the passage of time. The sheer, unbothered slowness of their existence is a powerful, visual cue for your own body to let go of its urgency. There is nowhere you need to rush to. There is nothing you need to complete. You can simply exist in this golden light, moving at the slow, deliberate pace of the ancient world. As we drift closer to the earth, the true masters of this environment come into focus. Moving through the deepest, thickest parts of the tall grass is a massive family herd of prehistoric elephants. These are not the sparse, heat-stressed survivors of a modern drought. These are colossal, thriving titans, their bodies heavy and round with the sheer abundance of the humid epoch. The auditory presence of these elephants is a masterpiece of low-frequency, tactile sound. Because the ground beneath them is thick, soft, and saturated with moisture, their massive footfalls do not create sharp, jarring impacts. Instead, as a multi-ton elephant places its foot upon the earth, you hear a deep, muffled, rhythmic compression. Thud, crunch, thud, crunch. It is the sound of heavy weight being perfectly supported by a soft, yielding world. Accompanying the slow rhythm of their march is the incredibly rich, tactile sound of their feeding. You can hear the strong, muscular sweep of their heavy trunks wrapping around massive bundles of the thick, wet grass. Then comes the sharp, satisfying tear as the roots pull free from the damp soil, followed by the deep, heavy, wet sound of chewing. It is a thick, organic percussion, a sound of profound satisfaction and absolute nourishment. But the most incredible sound in this savanna chorus does not come from the grass or the trees. It comes from deep within the chests of the elephants themselves. To communicate across the vast distances of the tall grass, these ancient creatures use infrasound frequencies so low that they sit at the very edge of human hearing. It manifests as a deep, resonant, sub-bass rumbling. As the matriarch of the herd releases a call, you do not just hear it, you feel it. It is a slow, purring vibration that travels through the heavy, humid air and directly into your bones. It is a sound of absolute authority, but also of profound comfort and familial connection. It tells the herd that they are safe, that the grass is plentiful, and that the predators are far away. Allow this deep, rumbling vibration to wash over you. Let it resonate in your chest, a heavy, organic anchor that pulls you down into the soft, warm earth. The biological white noise of this environment is thick and perfectly continuous. The rustling of the grass, the heavy, contented breathing of the massive herds, the deep, rumbling purrs of the elephants, they all weave together into a seamless acoustic blanket. And even here, miles away from the shores of the megalake, the presence of water is never forgotten. The humid epoch has dotted this sprawling savanna with countless hidden rivers, deep marshes, and sprawling wetlands. From the distant, unseen depressions in the landscape, the muffled, echoing calls of hippopotamuses drift through the heavy air. Honk, grumble, splash. The thick, moisture-laden atmosphere acts as an acoustic dampener, softening the sharp edges of these calls and making them sound warm, distant, and incredibly peaceful. It is a constant, gentle reminder that the life-giving water is everywhere, sustaining this paradise without effort or struggle. In this golden, sprawling savanna, there is an overwhelming sense of safety. The sheer abundance of the green Sahara means that the desperate, frantic hunts of the dry season simply do not happen here. The predators are fat and slow, and the herbivores are vast and unbothered. The ancient law of survival has been temporarily suspended, replaced by an epoch of profound, lazy indulgence. As the sun dips even lower toward the horizon, the golden light deepens into a rich, burnt orange. The shadows of the giant elephants stretch out for hundreds of feet across the rippling grass. The air begins to cool, and the heavy, humid blanket of the evening settles over the earth. The animals do not seek shelter. They simply slow their movements even further, preparing to rest exactly where they stand in the soft, endless ocean of green. You are a welcome, invisible guest in this sanctuary. Let the heavy, contented breathing of the megafauna become your own breathing. Inhale the clean, sweet scent of the crushed grass and the damp earth. Exhale the lingering stress of the future. The majestic herds are moving with agonizing slowness through the beautiful, fading light, and they are inviting you to join them in their deep, undisturbed peace. Allow the rich, biological white noise of the ancient savanna to quiet your mind and sink deeply into the warm, golden heart of a world that is perfectly, beautifully at rest. For thousands of years, the heavy, rhythmic drumming of the monsoon has been the absolute and unchanging heartbeat of the North African continent. We have existed in a world defined by the deep, resonant weight of water, surrounded by endless, emerald green savannas, and the massive, tranquil expanse of inland seas. The earth has been soft, dark, and forgiving, saturated with a life-giving moisture that seemed as though it would last for eternity. But eternity is an illusion on a planet governed by the slow, majestic, and indifferent mechanics of the cosmos. The celestial wobble, the imperceptible, agonizingly slow shifting of the Earth's axis that dragged the rain belt northward, does not stop. It is a pendulum of unimaginable scale, and having reached the absolute apex of its arc, it must now inevitably, silently, begin its long journey back. As we remain suspended over the sprawling, lush grassland, we are going to accelerate our perspective. We are going to watch a time-lapse spanning centuries. In the waking world, the human mind is only equipped to process time in hours, days, and perhaps, if we are fortunate, decades. But here, in the quiet corridors of deep time, we can observe the grand, sweeping exhalation of an entire climate epoch. Watch the heavy rain clouds that have blanketed this world for millennia. They have been a constant, protective, bruised purple canopy shielding the earth from the harsh radiation of the sun. But slowly, inevitably, the heavy rain clouds slowly begin to thin. The massive, continent-spanning engine of the monsoon is losing its fuel. The atmospheric pressure systems are shifting, dragging the moisture back toward the equator, leaving the northern latitudes to face the raw, unfiltered power of the solar system. As the clouds fracture and pull apart, they give way to an endless pale blue sky. This is not the deep, humid, and heavy blue of a tropical afternoon. It is a pale, stark, and uncompromising color. It is the color of evaporation. Without the thick layer of water vapor in the upper atmosphere to diffuse the light, the sun begins to bear down on the earth with a renewed, piercing intensity. The shadows, which had been soft, blurred, and cool for thousands of years, suddenly become sharp, black, and strictly defined. This visual transition marks the beginning of the Great Drying. The pacing of the world is slowing down, shifting from the frantic, hyperproductive explosion of green biological life to a state of quiet, methodical endurance. Observe the massive, sprawling acacia trees that dot the endless savanna. For countless generations, these trees have gorged themselves on the abundant rainfall, their canopies of vibrant, deep emerald green. But as the centuries pass in our accelerated view, the water table beneath the earth begins its slow, relentless retreat deep into the bedrock. The roots of the acacias stretch desperately downward, searching for the moisture that is no longer there. In response to this shifting reality, the trees do not panic. They adapt. They begin a beautiful, necessary process of conservation. The deep green leaves of the acacia trees turn to a brittle, beautiful gold. It starts as a subtle yellowing at the edges of the canopy, a faint blush of autumn in a world that has only ever known summer. Over the decades, this color spreads, traveling down the branches and transforming the entire landscape. The vast sprawling forests of green are slowly painted in brilliant, fiery shades of amber, copper, and fragile, pale gold. As the flora transforms, so too does the massive fauna. The great herds of prehistoric elephants and giraffes that once moved with agonizing slowness through the tall grass possess a deep genetic intuition. They can feel the air growing crisp. They can taste the lack of moisture on the wind. Over generations, their migration routes begin to slowly, methodically shift southward, following the retreating rain belt. They depart in quiet, solemn processions, leaving the golden savanna behind. There is no violence in their departure, only a profound, silent acknowledgement that their time in this northern paradise is drawing to a close. With the departure of the rain and the great herds, the auditory landscape of this ancient world undergoes a spectacular and deeply soothing transformation. For so long, the audio environment was defined by the heavy, wet sounds of the storm and the rich, biological white noise of the savanna. But now, the sound of the rain stops. The cessation of the rainfall leaves behind a staggering, echoing quiet. It is a moment of profound acoustic emptiness, as if the earth itself has paused to take a long, deep breath. The wet squelch of mud, the heavy drumming of drops on broad leaves, the distant rumble of thunder, all of it is completely erased. In its place, a new sound emerges to fill the void. The environment shifts to the dry, crisp, ASMR-rich sound of dead leaves rustling in a warm, steady breeze. Listen to the wind. It is no longer a heavy, humid gale carrying the scent of impending storms. It is a warm, steady, and incredibly dry current of air sweeping across the continent. As it moves through the canopy of the golden acacia trees, it loosens the brittle leaves from their branches. Millions upon millions of tiny golden leaves detach and fall to the drying earth below. As the wind pushes these dry leaves across the parched ground, it creates a highly tactile, incredibly detailed acoustic texture. It is a delicate, scratching, scraping whisper. It is the sound of absolute crispness, a sharp, high-frequency rustle that perfectly contrasts the heavy, low-frequency hum of the previous wet epoch. This dry, crisp rustling is the ultimate acoustic trigger for deep relaxation. It mimics the comforting sound of a warm fire crackling in a hearth, or the gentle shifting of sand. It is a sound devoid of urgency, devoid of danger, and devoid of heavy emotional weight. Let the visual of this golden world mirror the state of your own mind. In our waking lives, we often carry the heavy, saturated weight of stress, anxiety, and endless responsibilities. Our minds can feel like the flooded, overflowing marshlands of the humid period, overwhelmed and chaotic. But here, as you watch the green leaves turn to gold and fall away, you are invited to experience your own great drying. Allow the heavy, waterlogged thoughts of your day to evaporate into the pale blue sky. Let the attachments and anxieties that you have been carrying turn brittle, lose their grip on your consciousness, and fall away like the golden leaves of the acacia. You do not need to hold on to them anymore. The season is changing. The climate of your mind is shifting from a state of frantic production to a state of quiet, minimalist endurance. Feel the warm, steady breeze washing over you, carrying away the last remnants of the damp, heavy tension in your muscles. The air is so perfectly dry that it feels weightless, offering absolutely no resistance as you sink deeper and deeper into a state of profound rest. The earth beneath the golden trees is changing as well. The once dark, soft mud is baking in the unfiltered sunlight, transforming into hard, cracked terracotta. The landscape is stripping away everything that is unnecessary, leaving only the bare, beautiful essentials of stone, wind, and sky. It is an environment of pure, unadulterated simplicity. As we hover in this warm, golden twilight of the African humid period, wrapped in the delicate, mesmerizing rustle of the dry leaves, we are preparing for the ultimate descent into stillness. The water is gone. The heavy clouds are gone. The noise of the world has been reduced to a fragile whisper. There is nothing left to demand your attention, nothing left to navigate. Surrender to the crisp, dry air, and let the slow, beautiful fading of the green world guide you gently toward an undisturbed, dreamless horizon. The slow, agonizing death of an ocean is not a loud or violent event. It does not happen in a single, catastrophic afternoon, nor does it announce itself with the roaring fury of a storm. Instead, the great drying of the African humid period is a masterpiece of geological patience, a silent, relentless process of subtraction that unfolds over thousands of years. As the celestial wobble continues to tilt the Earth's axis, pulling the heavy, life-giving monsoons further and further away from the heart of the continent, the magnificent water world we have been exploring is slowly starved of its vital sustenance. The rains that once hammered the earth for months on end have now retreated, replaced by an endless, unyielding canopy of pale, cloudless blue. We must now turn our attention back to the colossal inland sea, Lake Chad, which once covered over 130,000 square miles of the African interior. For millennia, this massive freshwater basin was a symbol of absolute permanence, a dark, tranquil mirror reflecting the heavy storms of a green world. But without the constant influx of torrential rain and the rushing, sediment-choked rivers to replenish its depths, the megalake is entirely defenseless against the renewed, blistering fury of the Saharan sun. The great megalakes slowly pull back. This retreat is a phenomenon of heartbreaking, mesmerizing slowness. Year by year, the shoreline creeps outward, exposing dark, saturated earth that has not felt the direct heat of the sun in 10,000 years. The towering emerald forests of papyrus and thick aquatic reeds that once lined the water's edge are left stranded. Without the deep, sustaining water to bathe their roots, they wither. Their vibrant greens fade rapidly into brittle, pale golds and ashen browns, eventually turning to dust and blowing away on the dry, shifting winds. As the volume of the lake decreases, the physical nature of the water itself begins to change. The millions of tons of fresh water that originally filled the basin carried with them microscopic, dissolved minerals scoured from the surrounding bedrock. When the water evaporates, climbing back up into the dry atmosphere as invisible vapor, these heavy minerals cannot follow. They are left behind. As the lake shrinks from an ocean-sized behemoth to a fraction of its former glory, the concentration of these minerals drastically increases. The once sweet, life-giving freshwater becomes heavily alkaline and hypersaline. The vibrant ecosystem that relied on the deep, cool currents is forced to adapt or perish. The massive Nile perch and the ancient armored crocodiles abandon the shallowing margins, retreating toward the center of the dying lake, chasing the vanishing depths. Eventually, the water becomes so saturated with salt and minerals that it can no longer support the complex, thriving food webs of the humid epoch. The deep, tranquil blue of the water shifts, taking on bizarre, alien hues of rust red and vibrant, unnatural pink as halophilic or salt-loving bacteria and algae bloom in the extreme, superheated shallows. And then, the final shallow pools simply boil away into the dry atmosphere. The lake is gone. What remains in the wake of this evaporated ocean is one of the most stark, desolate, and hauntingly beautiful landscapes on the surface of the earth. The great megalakes leave behind massive, flat expanses of cracked, white salt flats. As we drift out over the very center of what used to be the deepest trench of the lake bed, the visual landscape becomes incredibly minimalist and flat. To comprehend the sheer scale of this minimalism is to force the human mind to process a total absence of geographical data. In the waking world, our eyes rely on verticality to understand space. We look for the peaks of mountains, the dark silhouettes of trees, the sloping walls of valleys, or the sharp, towering angles of city skylines. But here, in the heart of the evaporated sea, verticality has been completely erased. There are no trees, there are no hills, There are no sloping dunes of sand yet. The earth has been pressed into a state of absolute mathematical flatness by the weight of the vanished water. You can look toward the horizon in any direction, north, south, east, or west, and the visual is exactly the same. It is a perfectly straight, razor-sharp line where the blinding white earth meets the pale, empty sky. This infinite, featureless plain strips away all visual clutter. There is nothing for the eye to track, nothing to analyze, and nothing to anticipate. It is an environment of profound sensory deprivation, a blank canvas of geology that instantly quiets the frantic, pattern-seeking machinery of the waking brain. As the blazing, relentless sun finally dips below this perfect, unbroken horizon, the true magic of the salt flats is revealed. In the thick, humid jungles of the previous epoch, the moisture in the air acted as a heavy thermal blanket, trapping the heat of the day and keeping the nights warm and oppressive. But here, the atmosphere has been stripped entirely of its water vapor. Without that insulating layer, the heat absorbed by the earth during the day immediately radiates back out into the freezing void of space. The temperature plummets with astonishing, brutal speed, dropping from a blistering 100 degrees to near freezing in a matter of hours. As the deep, cold night settles over the desert, the moon rises. When the pale, lunar light strikes the millions of acres of crystallized salt, the earth does not simply reflect the light, it seems to absorb it and radiate it back outward. The cracked, white salt flats glow silver in the moonlight. It is a spectral, ghostly luminescence. From our vantage point, hovering just above the ground, the endless expanse of salt looks exactly like a frozen, ice-covered ocean sleeping under the stars. The geometric hexagonal cracks in the salt crust form a vast, intricate web of deep shadows, contrasting beautifully with the brilliant, glowing silver of the crystal surfaces. It is a world of pure, unadulterated cold light and sharp shadow. You are suspended in an ocean of silver, isolated from the rest of the planet, resting in the dead center of a glowing minimalist masterpiece. As the visual environment strips itself down to this stark, silver geometry, the auditory landscape also undergoes a profound, highly tactile transformation. The auditory environment becomes drier. During the peak of the African humid period, the dominant sounds were heavy, wet, and deeply resonant: the crashing of thunder, the thick, rushing displacement of water, and the wet squelch of mud beneath the feet of the massive herbivores. But out here, on the dead, glowing surface of the salt flat, the wet squelch of mud is replaced by the delicate, microscopic cracking and shifting of salt crystals cooling in the evening air. This is the sound of absolute, pristine desiccation. As the ambient temperature of the desert floor rapidly drops under the moonlight, the massive, interlocking crust of salt undergoes thermal contraction. The millions of tightly bound crystals begin to shrink, pulling away from one another. Because the salt crust stretches for thousands of square miles, this microscopic contraction creates a vast, interconnected acoustic network of tension and release. Listen to the absolute silence of the desert night. The heavy, booming biological noises of the savanna are gone. The wind has completely died down, and out of that profound, heavy quiet, the salt begins to sing. Tick, crack, ping. It is a sound of incredible fragility. It mimics the incredibly satisfying, high-frequency ASMR of thin ice fracturing on a frozen pond, or the delicate, rhythmic snapping of cooling glass. A sharp, microscopic crack originates just a few feet away, crisp and distinct in the dry air. A second later, a soft, resonant ping echoes from 100 yards to your left, as a larger plate of salt shifts and settles against its neighbor. Because the landscape is so perfectly flat, there is nothing to absorb or muffle these tiny acoustic events. A single delicate fracture in the salt crust can travel for miles, carrying a sharp, crystal-clear frequency through the freezing night air. You are surrounded by millions of these tiny, unpredictable, and highly tactile sounds. It is a symphony of thermal physics, a delicate, dry rustling that completely fills the acoustic space without ever becoming loud or overwhelming. The mind, stripped of visual complexities by the flat, glowing silver horizon, latches on to this delicate, shifting soundscape. The tiny, microscopic cracking and shifting of salt crystals cooling in the evening air becomes a gentle, unpredictable metronome. It grounds you entirely in the present moment, anchoring your awareness to the slow, physical cooling of the earth beneath you. Imagine lying back upon this vast, silver plain. The salt crust is hard, perfectly smooth, and cool to the touch. You are entirely alone in the center of an evaporated sea, thousands of miles away from the nearest blade of grass or drop of water. But this isolation is not frightening. It is deeply, profoundly purifying. The crushing, heavy complexities of the green world have been boiled away by the sun, leaving nothing behind but the clean, sterile, and infinitely flat expanse of the salt. The delicate, dry sounds of the shifting crystals wash over you, clearing away the lingering dampness of the humid epoch. You are resting on the bones of a vanished ocean, bathed in the silent silver light of the moon, listening to the very earth itself contracting and settling into a long, undisturbed slumber. Allow the crisp, dry, acoustic environment to completely dehydrate your anxieties, leaving your mind as clear, flat, and peaceful as the endless, glowing expanse of the silent salt flats. We leave behind the blinding, silver expanse of the evaporating seas and the microscopic, delicate shifting of the cooling salt crystals. The great, flat basins of the Sahara, once brimming with deep blue fresh water, have now surrendered entirely to the dry, relentless heat of the shifting climate. But the story of the water does not end on the flat plains. To truly understand the unimaginable power and volume of the rains that once hammered this continent, we must leave the lowlands and drift upward toward the rugged, towering plateaus of the Saharan interior. We are moving toward the rocky heart of the desert, toward places like the Tassili Niger and the Aneti Plateau, where the true, violent legacy of the African humid period has been carved permanently into the bedrock of the earth. As we approach these highland massifs, the landscape dramatically shifts. The pale, cracked earth gives way to colossal, towering monuments of deep, oxidized red sandstone. These are not the rolling, gentle hills of a temperate forest. These are massive, jagged fortresses of rock, rising abruptly from the desert floor like the ruined walls of a Titan's city. From a distance, they appear impenetrable, a solid, unbroken shield of stone baking in the harsh, dry sun. But as we drift closer, the facade breaks. We see that the stone is not solid. It has been shattered, sliced, and hollowed out by a force of unimaginable kinetic energy. We are looking at the entrances to the wadis, the fossil rivers of the Sahara. In our modern world, a river is a living, breathing entity. It babbles, it rushes, it teems with fish, and its banks are choked with green life. But a wadi is the ghost of a river. It is a deep, winding canyon, a massive, dry artery running through the stone, entirely devoid of the liquid that created it. To comprehend the sheer scale of these deep, winding canyons of red stone, we must briefly cast our minds back to the peak of the endless monsoons. When the heavy, bruised clouds of the humid epoch unleashed trillions of gallons of water upon these highlands, the water had to go somewhere. Driven by the relentless pull of gravity, it pooled, it flowed, and it accelerated, seeking the fastest path down to the megalakes below. For thousands of years, raging, violent torrents of sediment-choked water roared through these highlands. The water was a colossal, liquid abrasive, carrying millions of tons of sand, gravel, and boulders, grinding them relentlessly against the relatively soft sandstone. Century after century, millennium after millennium, the rivers cut deeper and deeper into the earth. They did not carve straight, logical lines. They followed the path of least resistance, seeking out the microscopic weaknesses in the rock, winding, twisting, and turning back on themselves to create a dizzying, labyrinthine network of colossal stone corridors. But today, the raging torrents are gone. The celestial wobble has tilted the earth away from the rains, and the water has retreated into the deep, forgotten aquifers hundreds of feet below ground. The rivers have died, leaving behind only their massive, empty graves. Let us drift slowly into the mouth of one of these great fossil rivers. As we cross the threshold, leaving the open, baking desert behind and entering the canyon, the physical environment instantly and profoundly changes. The walls of the wadi rise hundreds of feet into the air on either side of us, narrow and imposing. But look closely at the surface of this red stone. It is not rough, jagged, or broken. The walls are impossibly, beautifully smooth. They have been polished to a glass-like finish by the endless friction of the ancient water. You can see the undulating, sweeping curves carved into the rock, massive fluid scallops and sweeping concavities that perfectly mimic the turbulent, chaotic flow of the long-lost river. The stone itself seems to flow, frozen in a state of liquid motion. Running your imaginary hand along these smooth, water-worn walls, you can feel the deep, alternating strata of the earth. The oxidized iron in the sandstone paints the canyon in a breathtaking spectrum of warm colors, deep rust, vibrant crimson, burnt orange, and pale, dusty rose. These colors tell the story of millions of years of geological compression laid bare by the surgical precision of the vanished water. As we drift deeper into the winding stone corridor, the most immediate and comforting sensation is the drop in temperature. Out on the open desert plain, the sun is a brutal, unyielding force. But down here, deep within the twisting anatomy of the earth, the sun can only reach the canyon floor for a few brief, fleeting minutes a day when it is directly overhead. For the rest of the time, the wadi is bathed in deep, cooling shadows. The massive stone walls act as a colossal thermal sink. They absorb the cool night air and hold on to it throughout the day, creating an incredible microclimate of profound, shaded relief. Stepping into the deep shadow of the fossil river feels like stepping into a vast, ancient cathedral. The heat of the day is instantly stripped away from your skin, replaced by a cool, heavy, and incredibly soothing atmosphere. It is a protective embrace from the earth itself, shielding you entirely from the harsh realities of the surface world. And as the visual world narrows to the smooth red walls and the narrow ribbon of pale blue sky far above, the auditory landscape of the Sahara undergoes its most dramatic shift yet. Throughout the green epoch, the air was filled with a rich, biological white noise of the savanna, the splashing of water, the cries of birds, the heavy footsteps of the megafauna. Even as the lakes evaporated, there was the sound of the cracking salt and the rustling of dry leaves. But here, deep within the fossil river, we experience the absolute cessation of biological noise. There is no water to sustain life. There are no plants to rustle in the breeze. There are no insects to hum and no animals to call out. The silence of the wadi is absolute, heavy, and staggering. It is a profound acoustic void that initially feels almost startling in its purity. In our waking lives, we are never truly subjected to this level of silence. There is always the hum of electricity, the distant rumble of traffic, the subtle shifting of a house settling. But down here, the earth is dead, dry, and perfectly still. Yet this absolute biological silence is not an empty vacuum. Nature eventually fills every void, and in the absence of the rushing water, a new invisible river has taken its place. Listen to the wind. Out on the open desert, the wind is a chaotic, howling force, scattering sand and tearing across the flat plains in every direction. But when that massive atmospheric pressure encounters the narrow, winding labyrinth of the wadi, it is funneled, compressed, and focused. The deep stone corridors act like the massive, curved pipes of a planetary organ. As the air is forced through the smooth, undulating curves of the canyon, it creates a sound that is entirely unique to this dry, ancient environment. It is the hollow, echoing whisper of wind funneling through the empty, winding stone corridors. It does not roar. It does not howl. It breathes. It is a low, continuous, and incredibly resonant sigh that travels for miles down the length of the fossil river. Because the walls are so smooth and the canyon so narrow, the sound waves bounce back and forth, layering upon themselves to create a rich, complex, and deeply soothing drone. It is a dry, tactile acoustic wash that mimics the sound of the vanished water, a ghostly echo of the raging river that carved the stone. This hollow whisper is the perfect, unchanging white noise. It has no sudden peaks, no sharp interruptions. It is the sound of pure, unadulterated geography. As you listen to the steady, resonant exhalation of the canyon, you can feel the complex, tangled thoughts of your waking mind being gently smoothed away, eroded by the wind, just as the sandstone was eroded by the water. There is a profound, comforting isolation in drifting through these deep, empty corridors. The winding nature of the wadi means you can never see further than the next bend. The modern world, with its endless horizons and infinite, overwhelming possibilities, is completely cut off. Your universe is reduced to the smooth red stone to your left, the smooth red stone to your right, the cooling shadows below, and the whisper of the wind. This environment demands nothing of you. The stone does not judge, the wind does not rush. You are merely a microscopic observer floating through a monument to deep geological time. The sheer, incomprehensible age of these fossil rivers puts everything into perspective. The anxieties of the day, the stresses of the week, they are less than a grain of sand against the millions of years it took to carve this canyon. Allow yourself to drift deeper into the labyrinth. Follow the sweeping, fluid curves of the red sandstone. Let the deep, cooling shadows wash over you, lowering your internal temperature and slowing your pulse. The absolute cessation of biological noise is a gift, a rare and beautiful opportunity for the mind to completely unplug from the chaotic network of life. There is no need to navigate. The path has already been cut for you by the ancient waters. You only need to follow the hollow, echoing whisper of the wind, letting it carry you further and further away from the noise, down into the deepest, quietest, and most peaceful shadows of the forgotten earth. Rest here in the cool, smooth embrace of the stone, and let the dry river guide you toward the profound stillness of the desert night. We have journeyed through the massive, continent-spanning epochs of the African humid period. We have flown over the boundless, deep blue expanse of Lake Mega Chad, and we have listened to the slow, tragic evaporation of the inland seas and the silencing of the great, rushing rivers. The world has dried. The vibrant, pulsating greens of the savanna have been completely burned away, replaced by the stark, unforgiving, and endless gold of the deep desert. The atmosphere is no longer heavy with life-giving moisture. It is stripped entirely bare, a fragile, searing lens through which the relentless sun bakes the cracked earth. As we travel deeper into this newly formed wasteland, the sheer staggering scale of the emptiness begins to press upon the mind. We are moving into the absolute dead center of the Sahara, toward a remote, elevated geological formation known today as the Gilf Kibir Plateau. This is a fortress of jagged, dark sandstone rising out of the endless ocean of shifting dunes. In the waking world, this plateau is one of the most hostile, remote, and inhospitable places on the face of the earth. It is a landscape of absolute extremes, where the midday sun can blister the skin in minutes, and the dry, howling winds scour the rock with the abrasive force of a million tiny, airborne glass shards. But we are not going to remain out in the punishing glare of the sun. We are seeking a sanctuary. We are looking for a place where the violent, shifting sands of the surface cannot reach, a place where time itself has been perfectly, miraculously suspended in the dark. Imagine standing at the base of a towering, sheer cliff face of red sandstone. The heat radiating off the rock is a physical, heavy presence. The air shimmers and distorts with thermal updrafts. But at the very base of this massive stone wall, hidden behind a collapsed pile of ancient, sun-baked boulders, there is a narrow, jagged fissure. It is an opening in the earth, a dark, inviting mouth leading deep into the bedrock of the continent. As we step through this narrow threshold and leave the blinding, harsh light of the desert behind, the physical transformation is instantaneous and profoundly shocking. The camera of your mind's eye ventures into the deep, cool dark of the sandstone cave. The first thing you notice is the temperature. The brutal, suffocating heat of the desert surface is instantly severed. The billions of tons of solid rock above and around us act as the ultimate planetary insulator. The air inside this cavern is incredibly cool, heavy, and perfectly still. It washes over your skin like a soothing, physical balm, instantly lowering your core temperature and signaling to your nervous system that the harsh struggle of the outside world is over. You have entered the deep earth, and the earth is infinitely protective. As we move deeper into the cavern, the tunnel widens, opening into a smooth, expansive chamber carved by water that vanished thousands of years ago. The light from the entrance rapidly fades, shifting from a blinding, harsh white to a soft, hazy amber, and finally settling into a deep, bruised twilight. Your eyes, strained by the relentless glare of the sun, are finally allowed to relax. The pupils dilate, drinking in the soothing, velvety darkness. The sharp, jagged edges of reality dissolve into soft, indistinct shadows, but it is the auditory shift that is the most staggering. Out on the open plateau, the wind was a constant, howling force, a chaotic white noise of rushing air and hissing sand. But the moment we stepped deep into the chamber, that sound was completely annihilated. Listen to the absolute, crushing silence of the deep cave. This is not the quiet of a modern room. It is an acoustic deadness that defies comprehension. The thick, porous sandstone walls completely absorb any ambient vibration. There are no echoes here. There is no wind. There is no water dripping in the dark. The silence is so heavy, so absolute, that it feels like a physical weight pressing against your eardrums. It is a profound sensory isolation that instantly untethers you from the chaotic flow of time. In this total absence of external stimuli, your mind has nothing to track, nothing to anticipate, and nothing to fear. The only sound that remains is the incredibly slow, steady breathing of your own body, echoing softly within the confines of your own mind. In, out. The slow, rhythmic expansion and contraction of your lungs becomes the only measure of time in this eternal dark. This total acoustic isolation provides a profound sense of safety. Nothing can reach you here. The storms of the desert can rage for 10,000 years outside, and they will never disturb the perfect, unbroken peace of this chamber. As your eyes painstakingly adjust to the faint, almost non-existent ambient light bleeding in from the distant entrance, the smooth, sweeping walls of the cavern begin to take shape, and as they do, an impossible, haunting vision slowly emerges from the shadows. We have not just found an empty cave, we have walked into the greatest, most heartbreaking time capsule in the history of the natural world. This is the Cave of Swimmers. Scattered across the smooth, undulating surface of the sandstone ceiling and walls are hundreds of ancient, faded figures painted in a deep, rusted red ochre. At first glance, in the dim light, they might look like abstract smudges, the random application of prehistoric pigment. But as you focus, the shapes become agonizingly clear. They are human figures, but they are not standing. They are not hunting with spears, and they are not sitting around a fire. They are swimming. Dozens of delicate, beautifully proportioned human figures are depicted in the fluid, weightless mechanics of deep water. Some are frozen mid-dive, their arms outstretched, their bodies forming perfect, graceful arcs across the stone. Others are floating on their backs, their limbs relaxed, seemingly suspended in an invisible, buoyant current. There are figures doing the dog paddle, their heads held high above an unseen waterline. There are infants kicking their tiny legs, completely submerged in the joy of the water. The cognitive dissonance of this image is staggering. You are standing in the geographical center of the Sahara Desert, hundreds of miles away from the nearest, smallest drop of surface water. Outside this cave lies an ocean of scorching, deadly sand where no human being could survive exposed for more than a few hours. Yet, painted on the walls of this dry, silent tomb is an undisputed, vivid documentary of a lush, aquatic paradise. The pigment used to create these images is iron oxide red ochre mixed with the blood or fat of animals that have not existed in this region for 10 millennia. The artist who painted these figures did not paint them from imagination. They painted what they saw. They painted their daily lives. To look at the Cave of Swimmers is to look directly into the eyes of the African humid period. Thousands of years ago, the dry, rocky valley outside this cave was a deep, crystal-clear river, or perhaps a massive, tranquil bay of a sprawling megalake. The people who lived here were not desperate, starving nomads fighting for survival in a wasteland. They were fishermen, gatherers, and swimmers. They lived in a world of absolute, unyielding abundance. The water was so plentiful, so central to their existence, that they felt compelled to immortalize their relationship with it on the very bones of the earth. Imagine the world they knew, the warm, humid air echoing with the sounds of splashing water, the laughter of children diving from the sandstone cliffs, the deep, rhythmic croaking of frogs, and the rustle of the tall, green papyrus reeds in the gentle monsoon breeze. They lived in an endless green oasis, completely unaware of the massive celestial clockwork that was slowly, silently ticking away in the dark of space. But the celestial wobble of the Earth's axis does not stop for any civilization. Over the centuries, the angle of the sun shifted. The great monsoons that fed their lakes and rivers began to falter. The rains came later each year, and they ended sooner. The deep blue lakes began to recede, exposing wide, tragic rings of drying mud. The lush savanna grasses turned brittle and gold, eventually dissolving into dust. The massive herds of elephants and giraffes began a long, desperate migration southward, chasing the retreating rain. The people who painted the swimmers watched their paradise die. Over generations, the rivers slowed to trickles, and the trickles baked into dry, cracked rock. The water that had defined their joy, their culture, and their survival simply vanished into the sky. Eventually, they too had to leave. They gathered what they could carry and walked away from the Cave of Swimmers, leaving their beautiful red ochre memories behind in the cool dark, hoping, perhaps, that the rains would one day return. They never did. The Sahara consumed the world, burying the dried riverbeds under billions of tons of shifting, silent sand. The cave was forgotten, sealed away from the devastating heat and the abrasive winds. For 10,000 years, while empires rose and fell across the globe, while the pyramids were built, while modern humanity mapped the stars and split the atom, these painted figures continued to swim in the absolute, pitch-black silence of the deep earth. They are the silent monuments of the deep past. They do not mourn, they do not scream, they simply float, perfectly preserved in the dry, sterile environment of the stone. As you stand here in the vast, echoing silence of your own imagination, looking up at the faded red swimmers, let the profound weight of this deep time wash over you. The anxieties of your daily life, the pressing deadlines, the fast-paced demands of the waking world, they are entirely insignificant when placed against the grand, slow-moving canvas of geological time. The earth changes, the oceans dry, the deserts bloom, and through it all the deep, quiet rock remains perfectly still. The absolute silence of the cave is the ultimate sanctuary. It is a place where nothing moves, nothing changes, and nothing is demanded of you. The acoustic deadness wraps around your mind, acting as a massive, heavy shield against the noise of reality. The ancient people who painted these walls are gone, but the peace of their sanctuary remains. You are invited to join them in the dark. Let your mind mimic the fluid, weightless grace of the painted swimmers. Drift away from the solid ground of your waking thoughts and float freely in the cool, heavy silence of the cavern. There is no wind here. There is no sun. There is only the timeless, preserving dark, holding the memories of a green world safe until the celestial clock turns once again. Allow the profound isolation and absolute safety of the cave of swimmers to lull you into a state of deep, unbroken, and perfect rest. As we gently leave the cool, sheltered darkness of the sandstone caves behind, stepping away from the faded red paintings of ancient swimmers, we emerge back into the vast, open expanse of the changing desert. The harsh, blistering heat of the Saharan afternoon has finally broken. The relentless, blinding glare of the sun has surrendered to the approaching night, and the sky is beginning its magnificent, slow-motion descent into twilight. We are stepping out onto a sprawling plain covered in massive fallen tree trunks that have turned completely to solid stone. This is a graveyard of titans, a silent, breathtaking monument to the green world that once thrived here. Look out across this impossible landscape. As the sun dips below the horizon, it casts long, stretching shadows across the flat, featureless earth. The sky above is transforming into a breathtaking canopy of bruised plum, deep indigo, and fading burnt orange. Beneath this celestial display, the ancient logs rest in the sand, frozen in time under a darkening twilight sky. From a distance, they look exactly like recently fallen timber. You can see the rough, grooved texture of their bark, the jagged, splintered edges where branches were once torn away by ancient storms, and the perfectly preserved, concentric rings of their heartwood. But as we drift closer, the illusion of soft, decaying wood is beautifully shattered. These trees are not made of cellulose and sap. They are solid, incredibly dense, heavy stone. They are monuments of quartz, agate, amethyst, and chalcedony, glittering faintly in the dying light of the day. How does a living, breathing forest, a lush, vibrant canopy that once drank from the deep, freshwater megalakes and swayed in the heavy monsoon winds, transform into a landscape of eternal crystal? The answer lies in a staggering, agonizingly slow geological process, a profound alchemy that takes millions of years to complete. It is the slow transition of organic life into eternal stone. Imagine this exact spot, not as a dry, sandy plain, but as a dense, thriving floodplain during the height of the African humid period. These massive trees stood tall, their roots drinking deeply from the swollen rivers, their broad leaves capturing the intense energy of the sun. But nature is a chaotic force. A massive flood, a violent volcanic eruption, or a sudden catastrophic mudslide swept through this valley, violently uprooting these giants and burying them deep beneath millions of tons of heavy, suffocating sediment and wet ash. Buried deep underground, cut off entirely from oxygen, the wood could not rot. The bacteria and fungi that normally break down organic matter simply could not survive in that suffocating dark. The trees were held in a state of suspended animation, perfectly trapped in the crushing embrace of the earth. As the centuries bled into millennia, groundwater supersaturated with dissolved silica and heavy minerals from the surrounding volcanic ash began to slowly, relentlessly seep into the buried wood. This water worked its way into the microscopic cellular structure of the trees. Like a master sculptor working at the atomic level, the mineral-rich water began a process of perfect, exact replacement. As the organic plant material microscopically broke down, a molecule of silica was deposited in its exact place. Cell by cell, fiber by fiber, the tree was entirely replaced by stone. The minerals faithfully copied every single detail of the living plant. The iron in the water oxidized, painting the stone rings with rich, deep reds and earthy browns. Manganese seeped in to create streaks of midnight black and deep purple. Copper and cobalt left behind traces of vivid greens and cool blues. The living forest was completely devoured, not by fire or decay, but by the slow, patient chemistry of the earth, leaving behind a flawless, crystalline replica. Eventually, the celestial wobble of the planet shifted once more. The great drying began. The rains retreated. The megalakes evaporated into salt flats, and the raging rivers vanished. The heavy sediment that had buried these trees slowly eroded away, scoured by thousands of years of relentless dry Saharan winds. The earth was stripped back, revealing these petrified giants to the sky once again. They emerged, not as living wood, but as indestructible jewels, perfectly hardened against the ravages of time and the harshness of the new, dry world. As we wander among these silent monuments, the auditory environment of the desert undergoes a profound and subtle shift. There are no rustling leaves here. There are no birds singing in the canopy, and there is no water lapping against a muddy bank. The biological noise of the green oasis has been completely extinguished. Instead, the acoustic space is filled with a very subtle, low-frequency hum representing the immense weight of geological time. This hum is not a sound that you hear with the delicate structures of your inner ear. It is a sound that you experience with your entire body. It is the deep, resonant vibration of the earth itself, the slow, creeping friction of tectonic plates miles beneath the surface, the faint residual thermal energy radiating from the cooling sand, and the heavy, crushing permanence of the stone. It is a frequency that speaks of eons, of epochs that rise and fall with the agonizing slowness of the stars. Listen to the profound silence between the notes of this deep hum. It is a heavy, blanketed quiet that completely absorbs the frantic, high-frequency anxieties of the human mind. When you stand among these petrified titans, the rapid, chaotic pace of modern life is instantly neutralized. Human concerns, measured in hours, days, or years, shrink into absolute insignificance when confronted with the slow transition of organic life into eternal stone. These trees do not worry about the changing of the seasons. They do not fear the drought, and they do not long for the rain. They have achieved the ultimate state of rest. By surrendering their organic fragility, they have become permanent, unyielding fixtures of the landscape. They rest in the sand, frozen in time under a darkening twilight sky, teaching us the profound, beautiful art of letting go. Imagine placing your bare hand against the rough, crystalline bark of one of these massive logs. The stone is cool to the touch, having surrendered the intense heat of the day back into the cooling evening atmosphere. You can trace the intricate, perfectly preserved grooves of the wood grain with your fingertips, feeling the smooth glass-like surface of the agate where the trunk was broken. It is a highly tactile, incredibly grounding sensation. The stone is heavy, it is solid, it is completely, perfectly still. Allow that stillness to transfer into your own body. Just as the mineral-rich waters slowly seeped into the cellular structure of these ancient trees, replacing fragile wood with eternal crystal, imagine a heavy, warm, and deeply relaxing energy seeping into your own muscles. With every breath you take, feel this grounding energy moving through your veins, replacing the frantic tension of your day with a heavy, peaceful solidity. Let your limbs grow heavy, sinking deeply into the soft, imaginary mattress of the cool desert sand. You are becoming a monument of rest, anchored safely in the quiet dark. The subtle, low-frequency hum, representing the immense weight of geological time, wraps around you like a protective cocoon, isolating you from the demands of the waking world. Above us, the twilight is finally fading into true night. The bruised purples and deep oranges of the horizon are being swallowed by an expanding canopy of pitch-black velvet. The first stars are beginning to pierce the darkness, burning with a fierce, unwavering clarity through the completely dry, moistureless air of the Sahara. These stars are the same celestial bodies that shone down on the lush green canopy of this forest millions of years ago. And they are the same stars that will shine down on these petrified logs millions of years from now. We are drifting through a sprawling plain covered in massive fallen tree trunks that have turned completely to solid stone, and there is nowhere else we need to be. There is nothing to accomplish, no destination to reach, and no timeline to fulfill. We are merely quiet observers, suspended in the vast, echoing corridors of deep history. As the darkness deepens and the cool desert air settles completely over the landscape, allow your mind to mirror the slow, beautiful petrification of this ancient forest. Let your wandering thoughts slow down, harden, and finally come to a complete, peaceful stop. Release the need to move. Release the need to think. Surrender to the subtle, continuous vibration of the earth beneath you. The Sahara is resting. The ancient trees are sleeping in their eternal crystalline shells. Allow the profound, heavy stillness of the desert to guide you down into the deepest, most unbroken, and timeless slumber. Rest now among the silent monuments of the deep past, safe under the watchful, turning gaze of the endless sea of stars. We have wandered through the dry, echoing canyons of the ancient fossil rivers, and stood in the silent, heavy presence of the petrified forests, witnessing the slow, agonizing transformation of organic life into eternal stone. We have seen how the earth preserves its memories, locking the ghosts of the green Sahara away in the cool, dark sanctuaries of the rock. But as we leave the hard, cracked plains of the stone desert behind, the landscape before us undergoes one final, magnificent transition. The jagged edges of the world begin to soften. The harsh rocky plateaus slowly dissolve, giving way to an environment that is entirely fluid, entirely shifting, and defined by a terrifying, beautiful purity. We are stepping across the threshold into the true heart of the modern Sahara. This is the first appearance of the true sand sea, a geographical phenomenon known as the erg. To look upon the erg for the first time is to experience a profound sense of scale and isolation that the human mind struggles to fully comprehend. The visual landscape here is stripped of all complexity, reduced to the absolute minimalist essentials of earth, wind, and light. There are no trees to break the horizon. There are no mountains to anchor your perspective. There is only an endless, undulating ocean of sand, stretching out for hundreds of thousands of square miles in every conceivable direction. As we drift into this vast open frontier, the topography is defined by massive, perfectly smooth, crescent-shaped dunes. These colossal structures of sand, known as barkans, are the masterpieces of the desert wind. They are not random piles of dirt, they are highly organized, aerodynamic structures, sculpted over millennia by the relentless unidirectional flow of the air. The long sweeping arms of the crescent point the way the wind travels, creating a landscape of repeating geometric perfection that looks less like a terrestrial desert and more like the serene, untouched surface of an alien world. The visual purity of these dunes is deeply mesmerizing. The surface of the sand is completely flawless, devoid of a single footprint, a single fallen leaf, or a single stone. It is a canvas of absolute, undisturbed perfection. As you gaze out over the endless ridges and sweeping curves, your eyes are not forced to dart around, processing the chaotic, jagged information of a modern city or a dense forest. Instead, your vision can simply glide along the smooth, unbroken lines of the dunes, following the elegant geometry of the earth as it rolls endlessly toward the horizon. This visual simplicity is a profound relief for a tired mind, a sensory detox that allows the optic nerve to finally relax and uncoil. We have arrived in the erg at the most magical, transformative hour of the desert day. The harsh, blinding glare of the afternoon has finally broken. The massive, punishing sun is beginning its slow, graceful descent toward the horizon, and the environment is bathed in the dying light of the sun. As the angle of the sunlight becomes shallower, the colors of the desert undergo a spectacular metamorphosis. The pale, bleached yellow of the daytime sand begins to deepen, soaking up the atmospheric scattering of the twilight. The dunes are glowing orange. It is not a subtle color, it is a rich, vibrant, and incredibly warm hue that looks like liquid fire poured over the earth. The entire landscape seems to radiate with an internal, subterranean heat, casting a surreal, dreamlike illumination over the silent sea of sand. This shallow, dying light also creates a breathtaking display of shadow. The windward side of each massive crescent dune catches the brilliant orange light, while the steep, leeward side, the slip face, is plunged into a deep, cool, bruising purple shadow. The contrast between the burning orange and the dark, heavy purple is razor-sharp, tracing the exact ridgeline of every single dune for miles around. This interplay of light and dark turns the desert into a massive, high-contrast abstract painting, a slow-motion study in shadow that shifts and morphs with agonizing slowness as the sun continues its descent. As the visual environment settles into this beautiful, heavy twilight, the auditory landscape of the erg begins to reveal its most guarded, magnificent secret. For most of the day, the deep desert is a place of absolute, suffocating silence. Without the rustle of leaves, the calls of animals, or the flow of water, the acoustic void is almost total. But as the evening approaches and the temperature of the sand begins to change, the thermal dynamics of the atmosphere shift. The wind begins to wake up. It starts as a faint, incredibly dry whisper, a delicate rustling sound as the evening breeze brushes across the perfectly smooth surface of the sand. You can hear the microscopic friction of thousands of individual grains of quartz and silica being lifted and rolled along the windward slope of the dunes. It is a crisp, high-frequency static, a dry ASMR texture that completely contrasts with the heavy, wet sounds of the ancient megalakes and the violent rushing rivers we explored in the distant past. This wind is the eternal architect of the desert. It carries the sand, grain by grain, up the long, gentle slope of the crescent. But when the sand reaches the sharp, curved ridge at the very top of the dune, the wind loses its grip. The grains tumble over the edge, accumulating on the steep, shadowy slip face. They pile up, millimeter by millimeter, building tension until the angle of the sand becomes too steep for gravity to ignore. And then the dune collapses. As the wind pushes millions of grains down the slip face of the dune, it triggers a slow-motion miniature avalanche of sand. This cascading sheet of silica slides down the steep purple shadow of the crescent, and as it does, something impossible and beautiful happens. The desert begins to sing. This is the phenomenon of the singing sands. It is one of the rarest, most hypnotic acoustic occurrences in the natural world. As the millions of perfectly rounded, dry grains of sand rub against each other during the avalanche, the friction generates a profound acoustic resonance. The entire dune acts as a colossal geological amplifier, catching the microscopic vibrations of the shifting sand and magnifying them into a massive, heavy sound wave. It does not sound like a scraping or a crash. It creates a deep, resonant, cello-like hum. Listen to the voice of the dune. It is a continuous, incredibly rich, low-frequency drone that reverberates through the dry twilight air. The pitch is remarkably pure, sounding like a bow being slowly, heavily drawn across the thickest string of a massive, ancient stringed instrument. It is a mournful, beautiful, and utterly mesmerizing sound, a geological chorus that echoes across the empty expanses of the erg. When you hear the singing sands, you do not just hear it with your ears. Because the frequency is so low and the source is so massive, the sound becomes a physical, tactile experience. It is a natural, heavy vibration that soothes the nervous system. You can feel the deep, resonant hum traveling up through the soles of your feet, vibrating in the bones of your legs, and settling into a warm, heavy rhythm in the center of your chest. It is the heartbeat of the modern Sahara, a slow, powerful thrumming that matches the ancient, unending cycles of the earth. This deep, cello-like hum is the ultimate lullaby of the desert. It completely drowns out the silence of the void, replacing it with a constant, protective blanket of acoustic warmth. It tells the oldest, most primal parts of your brain that there are no sudden threats here, no chaotic disruptions. There is only this slow, inevitable movement of the earth, the gentle push of the wind, and the deep, resonant song of the falling sand. Imagine yourself sitting on the warm orange ridge of one of these massive crescent dunes. The sand beneath you still holds the comforting heat of the day, radiating a soft physical warmth into your muscles. You are looking out over the endless repeating waves of the erg as the sun finally touches the horizon. The sky is a breathtaking gradient of bruised purples, deep indigos, and burning golds. With every gust of the evening breeze, another cascade of sand slips down the steep face of the dune beside you. The deep, resonant, cello-like hum rises up from the earth, wrapping around you, vibrating through the still air. It is a sound of pure, unadulterated peace. The ghosts of the green Sahara, the roaring rivers and the massive herds have all faded away, replaced by this perfect, minimalist serenity. Allow the heavy vibration of the singing sands to sink into your bones. Let the deep, resonant drone wash away the complex, jagged thoughts of the waking world. You are completely isolated in the most beautiful, untouched landscape on the planet. The sun is setting. The wind is whispering. The dunes are singing their ancient, heavy song. Surrender to the rhythm of the desert and let the warm, dry hum of the earth guide you down into a state of profound, uninterrupted rest. The grand, celestial engine that once pulled the massive tropical rain belts over the African continent has long since tilted away, taking the life-giving moisture with it. The towering reeds, the deep freshwater oceans, and the sprawling, vibrant savannas have all been quietly, meticulously erased by the slow march of geological time. In their place remains the ultimate monument to the Earth's shifting climate, the endless ocean of sand. As we drift deeper into this final eternal landscape, the blazing, unyielding sun that defines the modern Sahara finally kisses the horizon. It sinks beneath the rolling, petrified waves of the great sand sea, pulling the last remnants of the harsh, blinding daylight down with it. The vibrant oranges and deep bruised purples of the twilight stretch briefly across the western sky, a fleeting masterpiece painted on a canvas of dust, before slowly dissolving into the heavy, velvet shadow of the approaching night. The sun has completely set. With the departure of the sun, the temperature of the desert plummets with astonishing speed. The sand, which had absorbed the intense solar radiation all day, possesses almost no thermal mass to hold on to that heat. It radiates the warmth back out into the void of space, leaving the surface of the dunes incredibly cool to the touch. The air itself transforms, losing the suffocating heavy heat of the afternoon and settling into a crisp, sharp, and profoundly still chill. If you were to stand upon the crest of a massive dune right now and look upward, you would bear witness to a sight that is almost impossible to find anywhere else on the surface of our planet. Because the desert air holds zero moisture, the night sky is terrifyingly clear. In the humid green world of the past, the atmosphere was thick with water vapor, clouds, and the heavy mist of the great megalakes. That moisture acted as a massive blurring lens, softening the light of the stars and hiding the true depth of the cosmos. In our modern waking world, human civilization pumps light pollution and smog into the air, creating a dull, artificial ceiling that blinds us to the universe. But here, in the dead center of the Sahara, there is nothing to obstruct the view. The atmosphere is perfectly, flawlessly dry. Through this crystal-clear window of dry air, a brilliant, overwhelming Milky Way rotates slowly above the pitch-black silhouettes of the dunes. It does not look like a mere scattering of distant twinkling lights. It looks like a physical structure, a colossal glowing spine of star stuff, cosmic dust, and ancient galaxies arching across the entire dome of the sky. The sheer density of the stars is staggering, painting the heavens in ethereal, milky ribbons of pale silver, deep indigo, and faint, ghostly violet. As the Earth continues its slow, steady rotation, this majestic galactic core seems to wheel silently overhead, a celestial clock measuring out the passage of deep time over a landscape that no longer cares about hours or days. Beneath this awe-inspiring canopy, the dunes sit like massive, sleeping giants. Stripped of the sun's revealing light, they lose their golden hues and transform into massive, pitch-black silhouettes. They form a dark, undulating horizon that perfectly frames the brilliance of the universe above. The screen goes almost completely dark, relying on the hypnotic, dry static of the desert to guide the viewer into deep sleep. There is nothing left for your waking mind to process. The complex, vibrant ecosystems of the past have been simplified into the two most fundamental elements of existence: the absolute dark of the earth and the infinite light of the stars. As the visual world strips itself down to this peaceful minimalism, the auditory landscape also shifts into its final, most soothing phase. The deep, cello-like hum of the singing dunes created by the massive avalanches at the daylight hours has settled. The thermal winds that drove those larger movements have died down, replaced by a gentle, steady, and incredibly ancient nighttime breeze. Listen closely to the surface of the dark sand. The audio is purely the continuous, dry, hissing static of fine sand blowing across the ridges of the dunes in the dark. This is the sound of a million tiny, perfectly polished grains of quartz brushing against one another, carried by the cool night wind. It is an incredibly delicate, high-frequency rustle. It sounds like the softest, most intricate static, a continuous dry whisper that washes over the crests of the dunes and echoes faintly in the shallow valleys between them. This hissing static is the ultimate natural white noise. It lacks the heavy, chaotic, and sometimes unpredictable nature of crashing ocean waves or a violent thunderstorm. It is perfectly consistent, entirely unbroken, and deeply, profoundly dry. This continuous dry static acts as a heavy, weighted blanket for a restless mind. It is a sound that demands nothing of you, It does not carry the complex biological signals of the savanna chorus, nor does it hold the distant, booming warnings of the monsoon thunder. It is the sound of absolute, undisturbed peace. It tells your nervous system that the great drying is complete. The world is quiet, and there is absolutely nothing left to do but rest. Imagine yourself sinking slightly into the cool, soft sand at the very top of the highest dune. You are perfectly supported, perfectly insulated from the concerns of the waking world. You are suspended between the heavy, pitch-black earth and the overwhelming, brilliant light of the Milky Way. The cool night air fills your lungs, slowing your breathing to match the steady, rhythmic hissing of the sand. There are no more ancient rivers to explore. There are no more fossilized forests to uncover. The journey through the shifting climates of the earth has reached its quiet, inevitable conclusion. The Sahara is asleep, and it is inviting you to join it in the timeless dark. As you surrender to the heavy, continuous static of the shifting sands, the need for words and explanations begins to dissolve. The mind no longer requires the structure of a story. The narrative voice fades completely. I will leave you here under the slow, majestic rotation of the stars, wrapped in the cool, dry air of the eternal desert. Allow the hypnotic, hissing whisper of the sand to carry away your final thoughts. Let the vast, silent ocean of the Sahara pull you down into the deepest, most unbroken slumber. Rest now in the timeless stillness of the silent sands, the brilliant, overwhelming tapestry of the Milky Way, which is wheeled so silently and so majestically above the towering dunes, is finally beginning to soften. The sharp, diamond-hard points of starlight that pierce the dry desert atmosphere are losing their intense, piercing clarity. As we sink deeper into the most profound stages of the night, the vast celestial dome above us seems to lower, wrapping the world in a thick, heavy blanket of absolute, comforting shadow. The transition is incredibly slow, a majestic dimming of the universe that signals the end of our waking observation. We have traversed millennia together. We have watched the celestial wobble tilt the earth. We have flown over the boundless, deep blue expanse of Lake Megachad, and we have listened to the heavy, contented breathing of giants in a lush, vanished savanna. We have witnessed the slow, inevitable drying of the world, the retreat of the rains, and the transformation of the green oasis into an endless golden ocean of dunes. But now, that grand geological narrative is coming to a close. There are no more eras to explore tonight. There are no more ancient rivers to trace, no more fossilized forests to uncover, and no more sweeping landscapes to map. The grand mechanics of the Earth's climate have brought us to this exact moment of ultimate, undisturbed stasis. The screen fades to perfect, unbroken black. This darkness is not an absence. It is a profound physical presence. It is the warm, heavy, and enveloping darkness of the deep desert night. In our modern lives, true darkness is a rare commodity. We are constantly surrounded by the glow of streetlights, the standby lights of electronics, and the harsh blue glare of the screens we hold in our hands. Our eyes are forced into a relentless cycle of focusing, tracking, and deciphering millions of visual data points every single second. But here, suspended in the timeless heart of the Sahara, that frantic cycle is finally allowed to cease. The visual journey is over. Allow your eyes to completely relax into this flawless void. Let the tiny, exhausted muscles around your optic nerves uncoil and release their tension. The mind no longer needs to process any imagery. There are no sudden movements lurking in the shadows because the shadows have expanded to consume everything. There are no horizons to search, no complex geometries to understand, and no colors to translate. You are completely insulated from the demands of the visual world. The blackness is a clean slate, a soft, velvet canvas that invites your consciousness to turn inward, away from the external world and toward the quiet, rhythmic beat of your own resting body. As the visual world is entirely erased, the auditory landscape begins its final, gentle descent. For centuries, the dry, sweeping winds of the desert have been the dominant voice of this environment. They have carved the canyons, shaped the massive crested dunes, and carried the fine golden dust across the continent. But now, even the atmosphere itself is succumbing to the overwhelming demand for rest. The immense thermal engines of the Sahara, driven by the baking heat of the sun, have shut down for the night. The air is cooling, stabilizing, and losing its frantic kinetic energy. The wind settles down. Listen to the loss of momentum. The gusts that once swept across the high ridges of the sand sea are breaking apart, dissolving into weak, wandering breezes. The air is becoming thick, heavy, and incredibly still. The hollow, echoing whispers that funneled through the dry red stone of the ancient wadis are fading into nothingness. The world is exhaling a long, slow, and final sigh. With the death of the wind, the kinetic energy of the desert floor also comes to a halt. The hissing of the sand becomes softer, slower, and more distant. Imagine the microscopic physics of this moment. Millions of tiny, perfectly spherical grains of quartz, which have been rolling and sliding down the steep slip faces of the dunes, are finally finding their resting places. The friction between them, which created that mesmerizing cello-like hum, is slowly dissipating. The continuous dry static of the desert is losing its sharp edge. It is a sound that is actively retreating, pulling away from you and moving further out into the vast, empty expanse. The hiss becomes a whisper, the whisper becomes a breath, and the breath dissolves into the heavy ambient atmosphere. As the distinct, high-frequency sounds of the shifting sand fade away, they leave behind an underlying acoustic foundation. The environment is shifting from a landscape of distinct sounds into a landscape of pure frequency. The audio is eventually merging into a perfect, uninterrupted bed of warm brown noise. Brown noise is the deepest, heaviest, and most profoundly soothing frequency in the natural world. Unlike the harsh static hiss of white noise, brown noise carries a rich, low-end rumble. It is the sound of absolute planetary mass. It is the collective, muffled vibration of billions of tons of sand, stone, and ancient, buried bedrock resting under the heavy night sky. This warm, continuous hum does not demand your attention. It absorbs it. It wraps around your nervous system, providing a thick acoustic insulation that drowns out any stray anxious thoughts or lingering stresses of the waking world. It is a frequency that vibrates in perfect harmony with a resting human heart, coaxing your physical body into a state of deep, metabolic surrender. You are entirely safe here. You are completely hidden. The modern world, with all its noise, its demands, and its frantic pacing, cannot reach you in the center of this endless, dark ocean. You are resting atop millions of years of history. Deep beneath the warm, silent sands lie the ancient, petrified roots of the giant acacia trees. Hidden in the dark, crushed beneath the dunes, are the dried beds of the megalakes and the faded red paintings of the people who once swam in them. The green world is not gone. It is simply sleeping, preserved perfectly in the dry, sterile, dark, waiting patiently for the celestial wobble to turn the earth once more. But that is a story for another epoch. For now, the cycle demands stillness. The earth is resting, and it is inviting you to rest with it. There is no need to anticipate the sunrise. There is no need to hold on to the tension in your jaw, your shoulders, or your hands. Let gravity pull you down, sinking you softly into the warm, yielding, and perfectly contoured surface of the dunes. The heavy, uninterrupted bed of brown noise washes over you, wave after gentle wave, smoothing away the edges of your consciousness just as the wind once smoothed the face of the dunes. You are becoming a part of the desert's profound, eternal stasis. Let your breathing slow to match the ancient geological pace of the world. In this perfect, unbroken dark, there is only peace. There is only the quiet. The atmosphere is holding the viewer in the timeless embrace of the silent sands. Drift away into the warm, heavy void. Surrender to the absolute stillness and let the deep, resonant hum of the Sahara carry you down into the most peaceful, undisturbed, and beautiful sleep.